Hey everybody, it is Thursday, September 17th, and you don't have any notes for today. What you do have to do is watch this daily video so that you learn the process for making the leaf bowl. You're going to make one of them today, and you will make another one next week. And so you have to do at least two bowls for this unit, and I'm going to show you that process now. So the things that you need your leaf, whatever leaf it is that you're going to be using for this project. I'm also going to be trying out using these small leaves, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that. And so I'm kind of going to give you two options for how you could use the leaves in this bowl project. You need a pretty big amount of clay. This is about what I would call a burrito of clay, a Chipotle burrito of clay. And I'm going to wedge that in a moment. You're going to need your mold. You should have a mold that looks like this in your swag bag. It is made of plaster. It's really heavy, but if you were to drop it on the ground, it would chip. And when it chips, they get wrecked. So please be cautious when you're handling this. This is your mold that's going to help you shape your bowl today. You need your rolling pin, whatever it is that you found to be a rolling pin, whether it's literally an actual rolling pin or whether it's something that you're going to be able to use much like this to be able to roll your clay. There is another way to make clay slabs, and I'm going to show you that when I get to that point. You're going to want your tray handy, the tray I gave you in the swag bag, your slip container, and your toothpick, one of your toothpicks, and also your fork that should be in your swag bag. Or if you have a set of clay tools, then the tool that you're going to want to use is your needle tool. It'll look something like that, okay? But otherwise, your toothpick will do the exact same thing. Okay, so I'm going to take my burrito of clay and I'm going to wedge it. So I'm going to slam it down a couple of times to pack the clay and compress it. Then I'm going to ram's head wedge it. So push away, pull back, push away, pull back. And I'm going to do that just a couple of times. And this is more clay than I'm going to end up needing, but you need to make the slab, the big flat piece of clay, bigger than you need it to be. And I'm going to explain how you know how much you need in a moment. So I'm going to actually show you a better way to make your slab. Pre-flatten your clay by just pounding it down with your fist, with your palm, and then throw it diagonal against your wedging cloth that you've taped down to your table. Or if you have a clean, no, don't throw it on your floor, never mind. Throw it diagonal away from you, and always have a different edge of the slab facing forward with each subsequent throw. That's going to ensure that you're stretching the clay evenly every time you throw it. So, if you throw with one side as your leading edge, then give your slab a little bit of a turn and then throw it again so there's a different edge leading. And if you keep turning and throwing and turning and throwing, you're going to get not only a really round, useful surface area, you're going to get a slab that has really consistent thickness. See that thickness there? You want about 1/8 of an inch thickness all the way across to get that as good as you can to form the basis of your bowl. And what I want is a slab that's about 1/8 of an inch thick all the way across. And it can be hard to tell how thick your slab is in the middle. On the edges, it's very thin, but in the center, I can tell it's a little bit thicker. But I'm going to kind of just trust. I'm going to trust that this is pretty consistent, about 1/8 of an inch. If it's super thick, throw it another couple of times to see if you can't even it out and get it to be closer to 1/8 of an inch thick. So now I have a choice to make. I can either make my bowl be leaf-shaped, and so in that case I would put my leaf on my slab of clay, and I would press it down into the clay. And this is where clay's plasticity really starts to shine, because all these little veins, I put the more textured side of the leaf facing downward, so all those little veins are going to imprint themselves in the clay. And because clay has plasticity, it's going to stretch away from where those veins are, and those veins are going to leave an impression in the clay. So I'm just using my fingertips to really embed that leaf in the clay. Even the stem, I'll embed that a little bit, even though I'm not probably going to use the stem. You could use your roller to try and embed it as well. Just be careful that your bottle that you're rolling with doesn't leave little marks in the clay. Mine has been, so that's not ideal. Then I'm going to take my toothpick and I'm going to cut around my leaf. Take your time, you know, be careful with it so that things come out as accurately as possible. Okay, so when I get to the stem, I'm going to be done cutting, and I'm going to carefully, I don't know if I'll be able to keep my leaf from ripping because it's already starting to dry a little bit. Okay, it is ripping, but oh my gosh, this is so cool. Can you guys see this? Look at that nice imprint that it left in the clay. That's beautiful. So I'm going to take off my surrounding clay. And this is the clay I'm not going to need, but I don't want to just let it dry out because then I can't use it on a later project. So I'm going to do a quick wedge on this extra clay while it's still nice and soft and pliable, and I'm going to put this back in my bag. That way I can reuse this on a later project. Okay, now I have my nice leaf cut out. I need a sponge. And I'm going to use this sponge just on the edges, because these edges are going to be incredibly sharp as the clay dries, and I want to soften that edge. So I'm just kind of brushing or using the sponge away from my design because I don't want to lose my beautiful veins that imprinted themselves so nicely in the plasticity of the clay. So I'm just trying to minimize the amount that the lines get smooth, and I'm really focusing on the edges of the slab, trying to soften those a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to pull my mold over. I'm going to, as carefully as I can, pick up my leaf. Okay, here's my leaf. And I'm going to lay the textured side, so the side that has the veins on it, over my mold. Awesome. So that's draped over my mold now. I'm going to use my hands to gently make the clay conform to the mold. It doesn't have to hug it super tightly. It just needs to be draped over it so the clay starts to take on a curved shape. While I am looking at the bottom, I'm going to smooth the other side of the edges of my slab, because I smoothed the top side before, but the bottom side is still sharp. So now I'm going to take and I just have a slightly damp sponge and I'm softening all the bottom edges. I'm also going to smooth, and I'm just pushing so lightly right now, hardly at all, because my clay is so soft. I don't want to move my clay around or damage my clay too much. Then my next step is to add feet. It is going to be a requirement to put a foot of some kind on this bowl, and because if I didn't, once I flipped it over, once it held its shape, it would be super wobbly, and I don't want that. So a couple options I have for you for making your feet. One option is you could take a piece of that clay, go back into your bag and grab a piece of good soft clay, and you can roll yourself a coil. So I'm using the palms of my hands to try and roll a coil that is, maybe about the thickness of your pinky finger. That's kind of a good thickness. And then the place I want to put this foot is where the bowl changes from being a bottom to being a side. So right here, I'm going to make a mark right there, and I'm going to hold that mark, and then I'm going to make another mark here, and then I'm going to make that same mark here, and I'm going to make that same mark here, so that all these marks are equidistant from the rim of the pot. Then I'm going to take my toothpick, or if you have clay tools, you'll use your needle tool, and I'm going to score down the length of that coil. I may not need the whole coil, but might as well score the whole thing just in case I need the whole coil. And then I'm also, I want you to be able to see this here, I'm going to score the bottom of my pot where that foot ring is going to be joined on. Okay, remember when you're scoring something, you got to score both items that are going to come into contact with each other. You can't just do one. Then I'm going to get some slip from my slip container. I'm going to spread that slip on the coil. I'm going to spread that slip on the foot of my pot, and I'm going to add that coil. Ooh, that's about the right size. Perfect. I'm going to add that coil on top of that scored area. Now, my hands are kind of a mess right now because of that extra slip, but with my hands all kind of slipped up like this, I'm going to just kind of smooth around the edges of my coil because I don't really want this to look like a coil. I want it to look like a nice ring that's really integrated with the bottom of my pot. So I'm going to use my fingertips and blend some of this clay around. I can use my fingertips to do some melding and smooth this clay together. I'm going to need to get some of this slip off my fingers before I can meld. And I'm going to use my sponge too. And I'm going to make my sponge into kind of a U shape. And I'm going to make that U-shaped sponge smooth the top, the inside, and the outside of that coil all the way around. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I have all my components right now except for my initials and hour number on the bottom, or initials and class code, but I'm not going to do that yet because the clay is so soft. It's also going to be your impulse to want to take it off the mold right now, but don't do that because your clay is plastic right now. It's in the plastic stage, which means it's not going to hold if I try and take this off the mold. So I am going to set this aside right now. I'm going to kind of bring my tray over, and to the best of my ability, I am going to lift this and put it on the tray. The tray will make it easier for me to carry it around. I'm going to set this out in the sun for a little bit to get leather hard, and then I'm going to show you the other thing that you could do for this project to make your leaf bowl if you don't have a nice big leaf like the one I had. Okay, so this was my extra clay that I had before. I just pulled that back out of my bag, and I'm going to wedge it, and I'm going to pre-flatten it a little bit. And I'm not even going to use this roller because that really didn't work as well as I'd hoped. So I'm going to just use the throwing method. So I'm going to throw it. This side was the side that I led with. Now I'm going to turn the slab, and I'm going to lead with this side. Turn and throw, turn and throw. I know I'm doing this really quickly. It just takes some practice to always know how to turn the slab and throw it so that the clay spreads out equally. It's just going to take some practice. So if you don't get it right away, don't worry about it. Then the next flower I'm going to use is this one. So this flower, if I press this into the clay, let me see if my roller helps me here. Ooh, yeah. That embedded very nicely. Use my fingertips to really make sure I got all of it. So this wouldn't make a very good bowl. First of all, it's small, it's really skinny, and to try and cut around every single one of these would be insanity. Like, it just wouldn't work. So instead of making this bowl leaf-shaped, bowl circle-shaped, and it's going to have a leaf design within it. So if you have some smaller leaves or flowers or something like that, this is a good alternative way to do this project. Okay, so I'm going to set that mold on my slab, and I'm going to use that to trace my circle shape. I don't know where my toothpick is, so I'm just going to use this clay tool to trace my circle. Okay, I'm going to hold the mold in place so it doesn't shift as I'm tracing it. And then right here where I wasn't able to cut, I'm just going to peel the stem back so I can finish cutting it. Then I'm going to take my flower away. Ooh, that looks nice. Can you see that? Nice. So So then I'm going to take my excess clay away again. I'm going to wedge it so it's nice and compact and consistent. Put this in your bag right away so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to smooth up this top edge without trying to wreck my design. I'm going to try and avoid smearing that in as best I can. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up my slab and I'm going to put it design side down, so leaf side down, on my mold. Try and center it as you're putting it on there, otherwise your bowl is going to be kind of wonky and taller on one side than the other. I'm using my hands to gently let that slab conform to the mold. I'm using my sponge to smooth up the edges. And I'm going to do a different style of foot on this one. So with the last one, I did a ring foot. This time, I'm going to do a pebbled foot. So I still need the same part of my pot, the part where the pot changes from being the bottom to being the side. So right about here is where that is. So I'm going to make 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks, and I'm holding my hand at that same width for each of these marks. It's always best if you're doing feet on a pot, and if you're doing this pebbled foot, it's better to do 3. If you do 4 little pebbles on the bottom here for the foot, and if one of the pebbles is just a little bit smaller, your pot will rock, and that'll be really annoying. So I'm going to do 3 because 3 is a magic number, and it won't rock, even if one is shorter than the other. So I'm doing 3 little pebbles, just like that. Now I could score and slip these pebbles onto the clay, but that's not a lot of connection between this rounded pebble and the bottom of my pot. So I'm going to take, here's my toothpick, I'm going to slice off a side of my pebble so it becomes flat on that side. That's going to give me a better connection point. So I'm going to score that area where I cut a flat surface. I'm going to score the area that I'm going to join it to. I'm going to put some slip on there, and I'm going to put that pebble foot in place. And then I'm going to do that with this one. Score, score, score. Sometimes I get not lazy. Lazy is the wrong word for it, but I want to work more, work smarter, not harder. And so sometimes I dip my toothpick in the slip and I score and slip simultaneously. So that's okay if you want to do that too. So I'm going to cut my flat side and I'm dipping my toothpick in the slip. Score, score, score. Score, score, score. Slip is already applied. There we go. And I want to make sure that these are spaced equally. If your feet are more to one side than the other, your pot is not going to sit very nicely. So make sure you've got them applied exactly in the center. If you have a paintbrush, this might be a nice time to get that out, dip it in some water, and use it to smooth around these pebbled feet. I don't really have to meld these. I certainly could meld these, but I'm just going to use the corner of my sponge here to get in those nooks and crannies and to smear away the extra slip. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to do any actual melding. So now this needs to get leather hard, and so I'm going to put this one outside. All right, I know that seems like that was no time at all, but I just set these outside in the sun for about half an hour. If the sun is shining really brightly, half an hour should be enough time to be able to get your clay leather hard. If you're in a rush, a hairdryer will also do to try and dry up your clay. Now, I noticed a crack starting to form in this one big leaf bowl as it was starting to dry, so I'm just trying to patch that crack from the backside. I just slipped and scored some, or I didn't slip and score, I just melded in some additional clay. This is where the stem was, and so it's kind of a little weaker right there. So now I'm going to start with the little guy. So I know that it's leather hard because when I try and move it, it keeps its shape. All right, if you try and pick up your bowl and it's wobbly and soft, it's not ready to come off. So get it back out in the sun for another 10 minutes or hair dry it for about 2 minutes. But this is holding its shape pretty well. So when I flip this over now, there's my flower that I imprinted into the clay. And when I set it down on its little feet, it sits really nicely. One thing that I notice about the rim of this pot, it's a little bit wonky. It's a little bit kind of uneven. So I'm going to take my fingertip and I'm just going to smooth that a little bit. But I don't mind, like I don't hate the fact that it's a little bit wobbly, like it's a little bit organic. Things that come from nature are going to be a little bit imperfect. So if it's a horrible unevenness, then you might need to take your toothpick and trim it a little bit. But this is pretty, it's not terrible. The way that lip is just a little bit bumpy. I actually find it very charming. So this was the second bowl that you saw me make. Now here's the first one, this big leaf bowl. This one I have to be real careful with because it is a much bigger thing, and bigger things, sometimes you just have to be a little bit more delicate with them. So I am going to attempt to lift up my mold, and then I'm going to keep my hand on the bottom, and I'm going to do a little flip. Okay, and I'm going to lift it off, and there's my veins. The veins are still there. And I'm going to just very carefully set it down on its foot. The mold gave my bowl its shape. And the plasticity of the clay has allowed my clay to conform to that mold. It was stretched to fit the mold, and it is staying in that position that it was stretched into. So I ask that you do just one of your bowls today. If you need to keep working on it past our 75-minute class period, I think that would be smart to be able to get one done in a day. Your requirement for this assignment is to do 2 bowls, and the 2 bowls do need to be the same type of leaf. So I did a grapevine leaf here, so now I would do a second grapevine. So they were clearly part of a set and would fit inside each other with the same kind of foot, done in the same kind of way. Same is true with this one. If this was my idea that I wanted to do, I would do a second one with the same kind of flower, same shape, same mold. What I don't want is you trying 2 different techniques, okay? Because part of what I'm grading you on here is, can you make duplicates of something? Are you able to replicate and make 2 that are clearly part of the same set? So now these are going to just chill a little bit. I might drape a plastic bag over them so they can dry real slowly, especially this one that had a crack in it. If it dries too quickly, yeah, my crack is coming back here. If it dries too quickly, those cracks are going to become very troublesome. So we want these to dry slowly, so you can just take your plastic bag and just drape it lightly over the top. Not too much weight on it, just enough so it can just dry really slowly. And then next week, next week is when you are going to be making your second leaf bowl. So only one is due today. And you are going to be working on that, and at the end of your work time for the day, just snap a picture of whatever it is that you've accomplished and upload that for your assignment for today. And then don't forget about the attendance question, and that's it for today. All right, good luck, have fun.